Did you know that after Assassin's Creed Black Flag came out in 2013, Ubisoft actually started working on some interesting ideas for what to do next, and one of these ideas was a full-on First Civilization Assassin's Creed game. Nothing like what we ever would have got at that time. It would be a game that would have nothing to do with taking place in a historical time period, it would not contain any Assassin vs Templar conflict, but it would be a game set during the time of the ezio, something most definitely welcome in Assassin's Creed. If you're not too deep into the lore, the ezio are basically this advanced race who created humanity and ruled the world before everything collapsed. If you got into this franchise with the RPG games, just know that the lore runs thousands and thousands of years before those games, and it did not in fact start with either Cassandra or Bayek. Ubisoft had all these prototypes for futuristic cities, flying hoverships and insane First Civilization technology, stuff we've only ever heard about in lore or seen briefly in passage with the games. And you know what, I'd love to see those prototypes someday. Now of course the idea is very out of the ordinary and definitely not something many people would agree on, but you know, in a way, if you think about it, and hopefully what I say in this video adds up, this concept game actually makes a lot of sense. There's a ton of established lore already around Eden being a real city, Adam and Eve being hybrids who led the human rebellion, and the ezio enslaving humanity using the pieces of Eden. This game could have finally shown all of that in detail, what the first civilization actually looked like, how the war started, and maybe even the great catastrophe that wiped out almost everyone. I personally think this idea had a ton of potential, but you're probably wondering, well, what happened to it? Why did it not go anywhere? Well, it was scrapped because apparently it strayed too far from Assassin's Creed's core DNA. And you know what, in defense of that excuse, back then that kind of made sense. They were focused on grounded historical settings, but of course fast forward to 2017, 2018 and beyond, that excuse does not really hold up anymore. So yeah, in this video I'm going to break down what this game could have looked like, how it connects to the existing Assassin's Creed lore, and why I genuinely think it could have worked, maybe even more today than it would have back when it was first pitched. Okay, real quick before I go over the First Civilization game idea, I do want to also touch on another game idea that was brought up in the same conversation in the book. So right after Assassin's Creed Black Flag released in 2013, the team behind it was basically told, hey, you've earned a break, go have some fun. Now Gene Gusdun, who was the creative director for Black Flag and also Origins, gave the team a few months of creative freedom to just mess around and pitch new ideas. There would be no deadlines, no strict direction, just, freedom to experiment and come up with whatever they wanted the next Assassin's Creed game to be. And when I say they went batshit insane, I really mean it. One of the ideas they played with was basically a remix of Black Flag's world, but instead of sailing the Jackdaw across the Caribbean, you'd fly it through the air. And yes, those words did just come out of my mouth. So this idea would have been strange because instead of docking at islands in the sea, you'd be landing on floating islands in the sky. It was kind of like turning Black Flag's ocean map into a vertical 3D space, almost like a science fiction archipelago. The idea behind it was to take what worked in Black Flag, so that's clearly the sense of freedom, exploration and island hopping I guess, and apply it in a more focused way. It's a very crazy idea, let's be real, but it also shows how open-minded the developers were about where the franchise could go over 10 years ago. And this idea was just a start. What came next was even crazier, a full-blown First Civilization game, which I'll now get into. So while the Black Flag team was experimenting with ideas after the game shipped, one concept stood out way more than the others. It was a complete departure from everything Assassin's Creed had done up to that point. The idea was a full-blown First Civilization game. So according to Darby McDevitt, who needs no introduction to the franchise, and also Gene Gusdun, this concept would have taken place entirely during the time of the ezio, also known as the First Civilization. So this would be a game that would quite literally contain no animus, no jumping into a historical ancestors' memories, and as I said already, no Assassin vs Templar conflict at all. You'd be playing as a human rebel during the Human ezio War, which if you aren't aware, was a real event in the Assassin's Creed lore that predates everything else in the franchise by tens of thousands of years. Darby said, and I quote, "We had all these prototypes for flying hover ships, first civilization cities, and the technology beyond your wildest dreams. The idea was that you'd be playing as one of the humans who had rebelled against the ezio." Now, for me, this sounds fascinating, because it wouldn't technically be out of the picture for being crazy, since what he is saying is already within the lore, and it's not, made up on the spot. We could have seen these ancient yet futuristic cities, there would be high-tech flying hover ships, some crazy architecture, and of course there'd be pieces of Eden being used not as forgotten relics, but as modern tools of war and control. Basically, it would have gave us a great understanding of what the ezio actually lived like, and not what we see in the games where it's just, the remains and legacy of the ezio. And here's the thing that makes my interest for this go higher. I don't think we could call this game crazy by any means whatsoever, because this would be a game that would have been built on lore that's already deeply established in Assassin's Creed. For example, let's start with Eden. In the Assassin's Creed universe, the Garden of Eden is not a metaphor, which is something that many people would know in real studies as, the biblical references and whatnot. But instead, in Assassin's Creed, it's an actual ezio city. It was built by an ezio scientist named Phanes, who pretty much ran this thing called Project Anthropos. And what Project Anthropos is a genetic engineering program designed to create a workforce of obedient humans. Humanity in Assassin's Creed was literally made to be slaves. Some humans, like Homo sapiens, were made to do manual labor and the hard work. Others, like the Neanderthals, were made to fight for the ezio. And all of it was part of the ezio's plan to maintain control using their advanced technology, mainly the pieces of Eden, which we see throughout all the AC games. Well, except Shadows. But things did not go as planned. Two hybrids, Adam and Eve, were born immune to the effects of the pieces of Eden. They could not be controlled the same way as regular human beings, and eventually they fought back. If you remember the hidden glyphs back in Assassin's Creed 2, which I did make a video going on in depth, you'll remember something called The Truth, which was a short video that shows Adam and Eve running across a high-tech city with a stolen apple of Eden in hand. That city was in fact Eden, and their escape was the spark that started the human ezio war. Now, I don't know about you, but if we go back to that game concept, I could easily see this moment maybe being the prologue to the game. You could have played as one of the early hybrids, or a human rebel inspired by Adam and Eve. The game could have, opened up with you witnessing their escape and deciding to join the rebellion. And from there, it could have explored how humanity resisted and fought back. Now, the human ezio war in the Assassin's Creed universe was massive. And, without it, we wouldn't even know anything about what we see in the vault in AC3, or the underground Colosseum, or anything of that sort. Basically, the games would be way different if the human ezio war did not occur, and it was a decade-long conflict between humanity and their creators, a war that completely changed the course of history, and ultimately ended with the Great Catastrophe, which was a massive solar flare that wiped out most of both civilizations. That's how the ezio fell, by the way, and that's how human beings ended up inheriting the Earth. And again, going back to the game concept, what if we were able to actually experience that, and not just hear about it in Assassin's Creed Revelations through random lore drops or even the ezio holograms that we see? This game could have easily been set in Eden, and we could have seen what ezio society looked like at its peak. That alone would have opened up so many possibilities for just coming up with interesting ideas. I mean, even gameplay wise, if you think about it, the potential here is insane. They could have used all the ezio tech that we see in the comic books and the novels. For example, the Crescent Amulet. We don't see this in any game, but we do know that it's a piece of Eden that can project illusions, bring people back from the dead, and even see into the past, present, and future. And that could open up connections to past games, because think about it, we're seeing into the future of the ezio era, or maybe even the Ankh, which is another ezio artifact that lets the wielder heal the sick and bring back the dead. And those are just two random artifacts I named. There's so many other pieces of Eden out there that we've yet to witness in a game. I made a video going over every piece of Eden if you're interested. And because the ezio is so advanced, combat and traversal could have been entirely unique. We're so used to seeing traditional freerunning on buildings, but what about gravity-defying freerunning? What about cloaking technology? Even telekinetic style weaponry? Yes, it might sound crazy, but remember, this game concept would be set during a time where this would all be possible. And beyond all the sci-fi tech and crazy shit going on, even the story would have been interesting, as it would literally be connected to the core themes of Assassin's Creed. I mean, think about it. What is one of them? Fighting for free will. And this concept is exactly that. It would have shown us the origin of the first fight for free will. Adam and Eve were literally the first rebels. They rejected control. They chose freedom. That's what the assassins have always believed in, and this game could have shown where that belief actually came from, and it would have made a lot more sense for the games that are set way after. We'd also have seen how humans evolved after the war. After the Great Catastrophe, the few surviving ezio either tried to extend their lives or influence humanity from, behind the scenes that we don't know much about. And because of the animus, it's not even that far-fetched to experience this as a modern assassin. Maybe the story is framed as an advanced simulation. What's kind of crazy is that Ubisoft had these prototypes. I mean, Darby McDevitt even said it in the book. They had early versions of flying ships, the cities, the mechanics. It wasn't really a pitch then because they were actually testing the idea out. But of course, in the end it got shelved. And look, I get why. At the time, Ubisoft still wanted Assassin's Creed to be grounded in history. This concept was way off brand for what the franchise was known for at that time. But yeah, now, after Assassin's Creed Origins introduced mythological realms, and now we're seeing all these mythological creatures we can fight, I think a First Civilization game would be more welcome than ever. So yeah, this scrap concept was totally possible, and it would have finally let us explore the oldest, most mysterious part of Assassin's Creed lore in a meaningful way, something that I think we need to learn more about. It would have taken us back to the beginning, before the Brotherhood, before the Templars, before history itself. So I do still hope we get to see it someday. It is weird to think that we almost had it, and even weirder to think that it might still work today. Maybe they can make it as the final game in the franchise. Ooh, that would be cool.